Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Healing for the Soul, where every day I feature different guests to help you become the best version of yourself through different methods you may not have heard of or thought of. So today I have my guest, Terry McDougall, on the show talking about career, success, and happiness. So welcome, Terry.
Robin, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your time and energy in being here. And so what is your specialty?
Well, I'm an executive and career coach, and I work with high-achieving professionals and business owners who are what I call successful but not satisfied. And what I mean by that is that if you looked at them from the outside, you'd say, well, they've got all the trappings of success. They've got a good job, they're making good money, everything seems to be going in the right direction. But if you kind of scratch a little bit beneath the surface, what you find is that they're paying a higher price than is necessary for their success in terms of anxiety, stress, burnout, sometimes impact on their health or relationships. And so I try to help them learn how to have success, but be able to have it with less stress and duress. So it might require a little bit of shifting of the mindset as well as learning some new skills so that they can still have an impact, but without burning themselves out.
That sounds very much needed, especially in today's world.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with like the Zoom burnout.
Yes.
So who do you like to work with the best? Is it just the strict of the executive people that are in the higher up fields?
I work with people anywhere from middle management on up. I also work with business owners. So, it's funny. I've worked with people across many different industries and across pretty much every different functional area in business. And the thing that I've noticed is that the issues that people have are not really specific to, being in sales or being in operations or HR or being in any particular industry. Most of the time it's human issues. It's about how do they prioritize? How do they learn to delegate? How do they have those difficult conversations? Because it's things that we avoid that end up burning up a lot of energy and keeping us from taking productive steps forward to be able to do the things that we want to. And then sometimes what happens is we get into this habit of ruminating and worrying. And then what happens is our energy just drips out. And then when it comes time to actually take action, a lot of times we don't have the energy to do that. So, going back to answer your question, I love working with anybody who feels like they'd like to have better outcomes in their professional life and they can't figure out why they're not.
That makes a whole lot of sense, especially like with everything that you were just talking about too. That almost sounded like you were describing me at times.
Believe me, I feel like I'm coaching myself a lot of times when I'm coaching my clients because I've experienced so many of the things that I deal with my clients. And hopefully that helps me become empathetic and be able to guide them through some of their situations because I've often been there and sometimes I'm struggling with the same things myself.
Yeah, I've found like in my profession too, with the hypnotherapy that I've had to do a lot of the work on myself. And then I can help other people. Yes. And then like what you just said, for like when you're coaching, you're also coaching yourself at the same time. It's like, sometimes I swear I'm looking at a mirror.
Isn't it amazing?
People.
Sometimes when I see things, the breakthroughs that my clients have, it actually gives me better insights too. Like, because sometimes I might be like, wow, I would have never thought of it that way or looked at it that way. But, I have the privilege of being in that conversation with them and it helps me too. It's really beautiful. I love it.
That's what I love too. So I'm very glad that we have that same, it's always fun to meet people that have the same mindset of the growth of wanting to help other people. So what's the best way for people to contact you with your time zone?
Well, I'm in the central time zone because I live right outside of Chicago. And if people want to get in touch with me, they can go to my website, which is terrybmcdougall.com. And you can set up a free exploratory call there. Or you can also catch up with me on LinkedIn. And my handle there is Terry B. McDougall. And I'm happy to get connected with any listeners, or you can send me a message there. I'm pretty easy to get in touch with.
That always makes it very easy, especially like the more social media handles. This is what I found. And then try to keep up with them all. So how many children do you have? And did you start your career before children or after having them?
I have 3 children, and I started my career about 11 years before I had my first child. So yeah. So I actually had already gone back to school and gotten an MBA by the time I got married and had my first child, and then my 30s were very busy.
I can imagine, because I'm like, mine are, so it's a blessing that you started yours before you had the kids. So then you were able to do a lot of that work already. And then when you had them, it makes it so much easier. And me, I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm still having my kids, still trying to build my career, still trying to build everything. I'm just like, so then when I seen you for being a guest on the podcast, I'm like, this is perfect. I could learn a lot, because I'm like, there has to be a way to balance work, play, and kids. There just has to be.
Well, I think that there's I always think of it as you have certain seasons in your life, and there's certain seasons when you're more focused on certain things in your life than others. And, you know, when you hear about people saying like, oh, you can have it all. And I'm like, well, I mean, you can, but maybe not all at the same time. You know, with my kids, I had all of my kids when I was working at the same bank let's see, my first child was born in 1997 and my third child was born in 2003. So over the course of about 6 years, I had all 3 of my kids, and I had the same job. So, you know, I had a steady job. It was a job that, you know, it was not, at times it was stressful, but it wasn't driving or anything. And I was able to sort of, you know, just go in and do my work during this period of time. I didn't feel like I had to like push myself to move ahead or anything like that. But after my last child was born, I actually ended up getting a big promotion that moved us to the Chicago area. And actually, I became the primary, and for a while, the only breadwinner for our family. And we made a decision for my husband to actually stay home with the kids. So, you know, and it's funny because my husband and I, we've pretty much done every different combination of things that you could do to watch the kids. Like from daycare. Well, we haven't had nannies, but daycare, but dad staying home, mom staying home, you know, 2 entrepreneurs, you know, back in the early days, 2 people working for companies and having the kids in daycare. So, you know, we've always just kind of done whatever we had to do to make it work.
That's kind of where I'm at. Like right now, it's just my husband and I, between the 2 of us, watching the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And mine are all little, so I'm like, It gets challenging.
It's very challenging.
That's where I figure the benefits long term will pay off. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's an investment, really. It's an investment in those little lives, you know. And I don't know that I fully understood that when my kids were really little, and it can be really frustrating whenever they're so young and they need everything. You know, you need to feed them, you need to bathe them, you need to help them wipe their bottoms, right? I mean, it's everything. Yes. They need you for everything, and it can be so tiring. It really can. But, you know, obviously they grow out of it. You know, my kids now are 17, 22, and 24, so I don't have to do any of that for them now. Thank goodness.
I'm still in that stage with all of them. So
yeah. Yes, I know.
I keep telling myself, I will get out of this someday.
You will. And it'll be sweet memories, because you'll probably forget about the frustrating parts and remember the really sweet parts.
That's what I'm focusing on, especially at nighttime. I'm just like,
Yeah,
you did this
exactly.
and you did this, but you didn't do this. So what
Yeah.
inspired you to do the work that you do now then? Like, what was your first like aha moment that this was your inspiration?
Well, it's funny, when people have asked me that, I realize that it goes back further than what I probably realized at first. I'll tell you, at first, I'm the oldest of 4 girls, so I'm a big sister. I was always sort of like a helper, right? Helping my siblings, and that's how I was in school too. If anybody ever needed help with homework or something like that, I was always like trying to help, maybe a little bit of a teacher. And then when I first got out of college, my boyfriend at the time, his mother had done some career counseling, and she gave me this book called What Color is Your Parachute? And she told me to read the whole book and do all the exercises in the book before I started looking for a job. And that was some of the best career advice that I ever got, because it made me like look deeply into myself and say, what am I good at and what do I like to do? And then look out into the marketplace and say, well, where can I, do the things that I like to do and get paid for it? And so that kind of got me started in the area of marketing. And I did marketing for 30 years for a bunch of different companies over the course of that time. But the last company I was with, I was there for 12 years, and I had 4 different jobs in the time I was there. The last job that I had was not one that I applied for. It was one of those ones where I was voluntold, like, you're going to do this. And I wasn't in love with the job. I really tried to say, no, I don't really want that job. And she's like, I really want you in that job. So I did it, and I never felt like it was a good fit. And after having been at that company for 12 years, I knew it very well. And I looked around, I just didn't see any like lateral moves that I could make from where I was. And so, after sort of gutting it out for a while, I was just like, okay, I don't think this is going to change. I don't think I'm going to be any happier with it. So what do I want to do? I actually decided to leave the company without a job, to kind of take a sabbatical. I was thankfully in a position where I could do that. I really thought that after I sort of, got a little rest and relaxation and recharged and kind of detoxed from not being happy, that I would just get another job. But while I was out there, I was doing a lot of networking, and I met somebody who was a leadership coach. And
Okay.
when I was talking to her about her job, I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting. And she actually had a background that was sort of similar to mine. She'd worked in public relations. And when she was describing her whole journey, I started feeling like, oh, I think I want to do that. And I didn't mention this, but twice in my career before, I had hired coaches. So I understood the value you could get from hiring a coach, and I understood what they did. And so I guess I just put 2 and 2 together after I met that woman, and I decided to go to the same coach training program that she went through. And again, it was a little bit of a gradual thing, because at first I still was thinking, like, when I get done with this and get my certification, I'll just get another job and I'll just kind of do this on the side, and maybe when I get closer to retirement, and I'll do it full time. But just being in the program with about 40 other classmates, and a lot of them were entrepreneurs, I just started thinking, well, why don't I just give it a shot? Why not? And so I did, and I'm still doing it. And it's been a lot of fun. I really, really love what I do. It's really satisfying to help people, remove the obstacles that sometimes they don't even see that are in front of them, so that they can just move more quickly towards the things that they want in their life and their career.
That is awesome. So then, how long have you been doing this? I don't think I asked
Since
that.
2017.
2017. So be 4 years? No.
Yeah, it's about 4.5 years now. I left my corporate job in March of 2017, and I started the coach training in that summer. Okay. And I started coaching then. So it's been a little over 4 years, I guess.
Yeah, and I've seen you were in you have a book too, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I have it sitting right beside me here. It's called Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms. So
then I'm like, you're doing all this, and it's been a little bit of time. So that's awesome. I was like seeing all the big successes that people get so fast.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's amazing to me. It's like, it's just a little bit of time, but then you put a lot of work and effort into it, you know?
Yeah. It's one of those
and you
things.
have to, it's like you have to hire a team just to help you out.
I haven't yet. I have a virtual assistant that helps me a little bit each week, mostly with social media stuff. But yeah, just keep. I think that after working for 30 years, like I know how to do a lot of stuff. And I worked on a lot of big projects over the course of my career. And so writing a book, I wasn't really too intimidated by it. Maybe I should have been more intimidated than I was but I went through a book writing program and they sort of guided us through how to do it. And they had a publisher and everything that you could use to have it published. So, I still had to pour out all of my thoughts and feelings, and I interviewed a bunch of people and stuff for the book too. I definitely had to put the work in, but I also had some good guides to help me figure out, like, okay, now that I've written it, what do I do?
That always makes it a lot easier. So
Yeah,
then so then when you were writing your book, did you do that? Was that real recent that you'd wrote your book? Or was it while you still had the kids? Or
I started in 2019. And
okay.
So, I'm trying to think, like, okay, so that was 2 years ago. I started the book. I think I started in July of 2019. And I published it in April of 2020. So right after the shutdown.
Okay.
That actually was part of what got me getting onto podcasts, because I had these plans like, I'm going to do a book launch party and I'll do these book signings and all of this kind of stuff. And obviously that wasn't happening in 2020. So I started, doing virtual things. So going on podcasts and stuff like that. But actually, just to take it one step back from when I started writing the book, I actually blogged for about 2 years. So I can't remember. I think I started blogging right before I left my corporate job, just because I had a lot of things on my mind. I was really thinking about things like, why am I not happy here? And like, what's going on? So I had a lot of thoughts that I was putting out in blogs, lessons and observations and stuff just about working in the corporate world. So I actually did that for about 2 years. About twice a month, I'd put out a blog. And at some point, somebody asked me, like, how many words do you have in all your blogs? And I was like, I have no idea. And he said, you might have enough for a book. And so it was between somebody saying that to me that I was like, oh, maybe I do have enough for a book. And then a friend of mine going through this book writing program that she told me about, I just kind of put 2 and 2 together there. So I took all of the, thoughts that I'd written over 2 years, and I kind of pulled it apart and reorganized, and I actually ended up writing a lot more and interviewing people. But those blogs became sort of the seeds of the book.
That's always good, because I know, like, that's the thing I'm always told is repurpose. And I'm like, how can I change this differently? So when you mentioned your marketing background, I'm like, well, you would know how that is very helpful to do that, because I'm sure it made the book a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure, because I had already thought up all that stuff. I mean, some of the things that I'd written as blogs made it into the book almost untouched, but there were some that were completely rewritten. There were some that I just, said, nope, it's not making it in. It just doesn't fit in the framework. But, it was a lot easier to have a lot of content. And especially when I was going through the book writing program with some people that had no content, they hadn't even started. And I was like, well, at least I have something. At least I have words on the page. I felt, I think that helped from a confidence standpoint, even though it was still a lot of work just to shape it up and put it in a structure and, and then to look and say, well, what's missing? What do I still need to add here?
Yeah, I agree. It makes it a lot easier. So then how do you find your balance between the work that you do and still have time for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I go to the gym. I actually have a gym that I go to that has personal trainers. And so I have to set up time. So I put the time on my calendar to do that. I feel like working from home is there's some things that are nice about it in that, like my dog's sitting right here next to me, that I can just, if I've got time in the middle of the day and it's a nice day, I can just go out and take her for a walk. I find that when I get into a routine, like if I get up in the morning and I meditate, that starts my day off well. I can't say that I am perfectly consistent, because I'm not. But when I find that when I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling really tired, it's usually because I haven't taken the time for myself. And so I'll just try to, get up and do it right the next day.
That makes sense for what you just said about being tired and not taking time for yourself. Because I was actually wondering that myself recently, because I'm like, what did I do where I had more energy?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what was I doing? Like, trying to think of all these different things, but I never stopped and thought about that does recharge our batteries.
Yeah. It's I find that when I meditate, it can be a very subtle difference, but I'm just a lot more present. I was talking with a coach recently, and one of the things that he said to me, I tend to be very excitable. Like I'm interested in a lot of things, and people have definitely said maybe I'm not like high energy right now, but I'm very enthusiastic about a lot of different things. And he was saying to me like, "Oh, your energy seems to be all out here." And when he said that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, it is. It's like all over the place." And he's such a good coach. He was like, "Okay, let's do some breathing exercises here." And what I found that like my energy was coming back down, like, and centering me, because I was all over the place. And that's how I feel when I meditate, that I feel like, okay, my energy is here within me, that I can use it at my will, instead of, maybe just being shiny object person, which I can have a tendency to be that way. Like, oh, squirrel.
You sound like me. I was like, that's me.
Yeah. I like being that way. It's fun, but it's not always.
You got kids.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because you're not going to be able to concentrate on anything for more than like 30 seconds anyway. So
no, I've already tried to read with the kids. It doesn't work. I mean, like read my own stuff and watch them. It doesn't work.
Right.
I'm just like, I give up on that. I'm like, maybe when they turn 5, all of them are 5 and up.
How old are your kids now?
I have a 6-year-old. He's in Minnesota, but I have the ones with me. I have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, and then a 9-month-old.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, for me, I'm just like, I give up at this point of even trying to read at home. And I'm just
what? I can remember, like, I learned a really, really valuable lesson after my second child was born, and I was home on maternity leave, and, I've got a 2-year-old, I've got an infant. As soon as I would like sit down to nurse the infant, the 2-year-old would start doing crazy stuff, like climbing up on high things and endangering himself, and so I was so frustrated. I remember like really beating myself up and saying to my husband, like, "Oh, I'm so frustrated because I can't get the house clean. I couldn't make dinner. I couldn't do this." And he's like, "Your job is to keep them alive, period." And I was like, "Oh, okay." That's not easy, but that's easier than trying to keep them alive and clean the house and make dinner and fold all the laundry and all that kind of stuff. And, that will always be there. And, I'm sure that probably many people listening to this, much like our family, a lot of times you're digging through the clean laundry basket to find clothes that aren't folded. It's okay. It's okay.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. That's just like, that sounds like my life, because I'm like,
oh my gosh,
I'm like trying to keep it all together, and I'm just like, you know what? I just can't. I'm like, the house is a mess, and then I've got this and this and this, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm like, I love this sign. I seen it at Walmart. I never bought it. I should have, but it's like, if you don't like the mess, please leave, because this house has been well lived in. And I was like, yes, that's our house. It's well lived in.
Exactly.
But it's like, yeah, that's where I'm like, I can't do all of this. But I agree with you. Like, the main job is to keep the kids alive and quit hurting each other. In my case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like the one, 2 of them actually have special needs. So it's like, that I'm more ganged up on. And like when one gets done with the phase, like in our case, it wasn't the terrible twos, it's terrible threes.
Yes.
So you're done with the terrible three, then the next one starts, but then that one had to go to terrible two. And I was like, this is not fair. We got a terrible three and a terrible two going on at the same time. Well, then when they pass through that phase, now the 2-year-old's like, now we got to start taking off our clothes because we're in the 2-year-old phase. And I'm like, I just seriously got done with the other two having that phase.
Yes. Well, try to see the humor in it, right?
That's what I've done.
It is insane.
That's what I've done, but it's so funny, like how them kids, like for me, that's why I started doing what I did. Like what I am doing is because of my kids. And it's just like, I swear my kids, when they grow up, they're going to know that mama wasn't all there before you guys, but mamas have been there after you guys. Because that's when I'm like, there's so many different things I'm constantly working on that now I'm like, I'm glad that I'm doing it while they're little yet. Because I'm like, maybe they'll start to see like what we do for work, and help them long term. So then what are some of the things that you wish you had known on this journey into having the career success and happiness? Or is it even possible to have both without having the burnout, especially with like the kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is. I think that it's possible. But what I wish that I would have known was, first of all, that I was perfect as I was, that I did not need to worry as much as I worried about, like, am I good enough? What do people think of me? That's one of the things that I actually work with my clients a lot on, is to have positive, supportive inner self-talk, because sometimes we can be our own worst enemies in terms of the way that we talk about ourselves. And, I was giving you a little example of, when I was a mom with 2 young babies at home, I was telling myself a lot of negative things, like, oh, you should have cleaned up, you're terrible, your house is a mess, why, I mean, I didn't need that. I had enough burden as it was. And, if I had gone over to my sister's house or a friend's house who had 2 little kids under the age of 2, I wouldn't have come in and been like, where's dinner? Why is dinner not on the table? Why is your house such a mess? I would have been like, oh my gosh. If they were apologizing, I'd be like, it's okay. Do you want me to do something? I wouldn't. We can be really supportive to other people, and we can also learn to be supportive to ourselves, right? Just to forgive ourselves and give ourselves grace for not being perfect. I mean, we're human. And I wish that I would have just embraced that and loved myself more when I was younger, because I was doing a fine job, right? But I wasn't doing a perfect job because nobody's perfect, right? I was learning. I was learning how to be a parent. Because I feel like I carried around a lot of unnecessary burden, and I was already doing a hard job, being a mom and being a working mom. Let me think, like, what else? What are some other lessons? Well, another lesson is to ask for help. I will admit this. I mean, it was a passing thought, but after my second child was born, I was just so angry about how I didn't feel like I was doing a good job, and because I was judging myself so harshly, that I actually started thinking, like, should I divorce my husband? Because I felt like it was a momentary insanity, honestly. But part of the issue was that I was not telling him what I needed. I wasn't asking him for help in the way that I needed to. And, sometimes I did ask him, but I didn't ask him in the right way. And so he didn't realize how much I needed it. And I had to learn that lesson, to be like, sometimes you got to put your foot down and be like, yeah, I am leaving the kids here with you while I take a drive to McDonald's and get a Diet Coke, because I need to get out of the house, because I remember one time I asked him and he was like, no, he was studying for this exam for work. So, I mean, but he could have taken 15, 20 minutes for his wife's sanity, and
True.
when I look back now, I would have, like, if it were me now, I'd be like, listen, I got to do it. And I don't care. You're just going to have to, buck up and watch them for 15 or 20 minutes while I go out, because I need this time, But at the time, I just didn't, I don't know. I was just really hard on myself, and I
think
wasn't asking.
I think that happens to a lot of us.
Yeah.
That's why I'm just like, I started telling my own husband, I'm like, I need help with this. I need help with that. I'm like, in case you haven't noticed, I says, all of the people that are in the top, like you take careers as a whole, you would obviously would know more than I do, like in the career part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like a lot of the people, like when you Google who's like the top of like the executive companies, like who's the top of even like the network marketing, like all of these different jobs, you take them as a whole, it's always a man that's sitting at number one spot. And it's like, I told them, I says, who do you think got them to that number one spot?
Yeah.
It wasn't them themselves. No, they had to have a stronger support person than themselves, which is the wife. I'm like, in your case, it's you being the most supportive to get me to where I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I will say that when we used to live in North Carolina, and then I got a job here in Chicago that was a big raise and a big promotion for me. And it was scary, honestly, when I was doing the interviewing, because I was, we lived in a medium-sized city in North Carolina that I literally had a 5-mile commute from home to work, and my children's daycare and school was between home and work. So it was very easy, or not going to say very easy, but it was much more easy to balance work and home. When I could look out the window, I could actually see my kids' daycare like a few blocks away. I could walk there if I had to. So that's a little more manageable, when you live in a city like that. And then when we moved to Chicago, I mean, it's like 8 million people that live in the area, in the metropolitan area. And I took the train to work for 12 years. And when we first moved here, my daughter was less than 2 years old. She was about 20 months old. And, or maybe 23 months old. It was like, I think we moved here in October and she turned 2 in November. But I wasn't going to like put her in a daycare in the suburbs and then take an hour train ride into the city, because the trains don't even run like every hour during the day. They run a lot during rush hour. So if I had to get up here and get her, it might take me hours. And so we actually decided that my husband would stay home with the children. And it was scary to think about that. First of all, to ask my husband to do that, to say, okay, don't work, stay home with the kids. It was scary because there was a lot of pressure on my shoulders. But on the other hand, in many ways, it was easier than it was when we were both working, because there was like a very clear delineation of responsibilities. Like he took care of everything at home. If I had to travel for work, I didn't have to because when I lived in North Carolina, every once in a while, my husband and I both would travel for work with our jobs. And if my boss was like, oh, I need you to go to Atlanta or wherever, I'd have to be like, okay. And I'd have to call my husband and be like, okay, are you going to be around? I need to make sure that you can do like the drop off and pick up daycare and all of that kind of stuff. But, once I got this higher level job, I did have to travel a lot. And I couldn't be like, oh, sorry, I can't do that because of my kids, So it was really easy to know that my husband was here and he was taking care of that. And I think that that's what most men, who have families and have risen to, those high levels in companies, they've just got a solid support network because their spouse is taking care of the house and, shopping for their family for Christmas and birthday and holidays, and, taking care of the kids and making dinner and planning the vacations and, paying all the bills and doing all of the things that need to be done to make a home.
Yeah, and that's what I've been trying to, I guess for me, it's like really trying to explain to people that for the person that's at the top, they always have to have somebody stronger for that support.
Yeah.
They just do. So I'm glad that you were able to lay out more of that. I'm definitely going to have my husband to listen to our conversation. So I'm like, I've been trying to tell him. I'm like, no, how do you think this happens? So with the career success and the happiness part of it, can you have both of them, especially like in the work that you do as a coach? Is that really what it is I guess what is it that you do in your profession?
You mean, what do I do to be happy myself, or what do I do just like the day to day?
Well, like the coaching part of it, like the career
Yeah.
coaching and like the
Yeah.
day to day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the overview of what I do in a coaching engagement with somebody, usually I'm working with them from anywhere, to I start out with like 3-month engagements, and it can go anywhere to, 6, 12. I mean, I have some clients that I've worked with for years. And what we start off with is getting clear on what their goals are, because a lot of times people don't really like to change unless it gets painful, and so usually if they've got a situation at work, they've tried a lot of different things and it's not working. They're still having that pain. And so a lot of times in the beginning, they'll come and I'll say like, what's going on? And, a lot of times there'll be a lot of complaints about what's going on, and that's fine. I mean, it makes sense to vent and let like where it hurts. But at some point we've got to flip that table and be like, okay, we've talked a lot about what you don't like and what you don't want. Now let's flip it and say, what is it that you do want? Let's get clear on what that goal is. Is it that you want to be promoted? Is it that you want to stop working so many hours, but you still want to, be able to move up in your career without, working 80 hours a week? Do you want to get a new job? Whatever it is. I mean, people have a lot of different goals. Maybe they want to feel more comfortable doing presentations or being able to delegate work to people on their team. We just get clear on what that is. And then we build a roadmap. So we start thinking like, okay, well, if you're here and you want to get here, what are all the steps that you need to take to get there? And as we're putting the roadmap together, a lot of times we'll discover that there are some skill sets that they need to work on. And so that will become part of what our action steps are. Okay, maybe you're going to take a class, maybe you're going to read a book, maybe you're going to practice some things so that you can start developing these skills. And then, I give them a safe place to talk about things. A lot of times we're focusing on always we're focusing on, okay, like what were your action steps? Because like if we're in one session and we get to the end, I always ask them like, what are your takeaways? What are you going to do coming out of this session? And they'll make a commitment about the action steps they're going to take. And then I'll ask them the next time, like, did you do the things that you said you were going to do? Because I have to hold them accountable, right? This is not it's not talk therapy. It's really about reaching those goals. So they have to take action. Yep. And then, a lot of times around work, we'll also focus on, understanding what's going on in the office politics or in the office environment. Because a lot of times people are confused. They're like, I have no idea why my boss is acting like that. I was in a meeting and I don't really know what happened with this dynamic. So, helping them figure out like what's going on around you so you understand like how to navigate that. And then really besides getting clear on the goal, the last thing that I really help people focus on is how to shift their mindset to believe that their goal is even possible. Because I see it a lot where, people will come in and they'll be very discouraged about their situation because they have tried a lot of different things and it's not happening. And, we as humans, it's very common for us to want to protect ourselves from being hurt by being a little bit negative, by saying like,
that makes sense.
Because we don't want to be disappointed. But
no.
The reality is that if we say to ourselves like, well, this is what I want to happen, but it probably won't happen. Guess what? If you believe it probably won't happen, it probably won't happen. And so I try to get people to like shift that mindset to believe like, maybe this can happen. What if this did happen? What would that be like? Because once we can get to that positive mindset, it's a lot more likely that that's going to happen. So,
and it makes it a lot easier, overall as a whole. So then what is the best way to contact you for our audience with the time zone again too?
Yeah, I'm in the central time zone. I think are you in the mountain time zone?
No, I'm in the central time zone as well.
Oh, okay, central. Okay, so we're both in the
I just got listeners all over.
Yeah. So I'm in the Chicago time zone, which is central. And people can reach out to me on my website at terrybmcdougall.com, or you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn, and my handle there is Terry B. McDougall.
Awesome.
One more thing, if anybody's interested in checking out my book, I do have a couple of chapters that you can read on the website. But if you take a look at it and you're like, yeah, it looks interesting, I have it for sale on Amazon, both as an ebook and as a paperback. And it's called Winning the Game of Work.
Awesome. I will definitely put that in for people to know that as well on the podcast.
Okay,
and
great.
I'll place where it's streaming. Thank you so much, Terry, for your time and energy. I really appreciate it. It was a fun conversation.
Yeah, it was. It's great to talk to another mom.
Yes, it definitely is, because we understand it.
Yes, we do. Thanks so much, Robin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.